Today we'll cover three main topics in today's presentation. And these are what is CSM, and then what are DrayTek's CSM functions. And here we will cover each of the menu options, which are app enforcement, APPE signature upgrade, URL content filter, web content filter, and DNS filter. And then finally, we'll just go over one example showing you how to use the URL and DNS filter. And here I've got a video I can show you, which makes it a bit easier. So we'll just start by looking at what is content security management. So content security management, or CSM, is a powerful tool for network management. It's available in DrayOS routers that include the bigger 2100 series, like the 2120, 2710, 2820, and so on, 2920 series routers. The Linux-based routers, such as the Vega 3900 and 2960 and 300B, have similar functions, but they're not listed in the CSM menu, similar to the DrayOS ones. And as you can see listed here, CSM is used to control traffic to the internet, and this includes web content, web applications, messenger applications, peer-to-peer applications, and various protocols and some type of applications. So DrayTek's implementation of CSM simplifies the complicated traditional firewall configuration process. Most of the configuration involves selecting and enabling the required menu options, and I'll show you some examples later during this presentation. With CSM, you do not need to deal with with IP addresses or port numbers. So those of you familiar with traditional firewall configurations will know that it can be tedious and very repetitive. So however, with CSM, you can select the application you want to control and apply it to the firewall. So for example, you can select applications for peer-to-peer and online video directly, and then apply to the firewall. So this removes a lot of the complexity in enabling the same functions in traditional firewall configuration. And also, many applications no longer use fixed IP addresses or port numbers. So one example is BitTorrent. So traditional firewalls are unable to stop traffic from such applications. And CSM will identify the application and allow you to effectively control it. You do not need to work out all the port numbers to set up the firewall. So another advantage of CSM is that parents at home do not need to have a degree in computer science to be able to configure the firewall rules to prevent children from accessing undesirable web pages with sex, violence, online gambling, and so on. The parents just need to select the options from the web interface. So now I'll just start by looking at some of the DrayTek's content security management functions. And here you can see the menu options for CSM. That's in, I think it was in a 2860 router we got this from. And it includes it includes app enforcement profile, APPE signature upgrade, URL content filter upgrade, web content filter profile, and DNS filter profile. And I'll go over each of these shortly. So I'll just go to the next slide here, and then the first item we'll look at is the app enforcement. And this provides a layer 7 control and allows you to provide firewall security based on selected applications, which range from messaging applications, peer-to-peer applications, protocols, and various other applications. And in this screenshot of the app enforcement configuration page, you can see here that there are a large number of applications that can be selected. And these can be included in the firewall settings. And here we have selected the messenger applications. And on this screenshot here, we've got a selection of the peer-to-peer applications that can be selected. So you can see there's a huge list here. And here you can see some of the protocols that can be selected. So when you create an app enforcement profile, you can select any of these ones. And the last tab there is called the Others. And this has a variety of other applications that you can see in the screenshots. It includes you've got Dynapass for your HTTP proxy. There's quite a lot there anyway, but the list is quite long. And the next menu option in the CSM is the app signature upgrade. So it's not necessary to have an APPE license activated to use the app enforcement feature, but the app APPE license, which is supported on 2925, 2860 and Vigor 2760, the Lite series of routers. So this feature allows the routers to upgrade the APPE definition automatically to keep the router app database up to date. So this will ensure that the app enforcement works correctly. So it's recommended to activate the APPE license. And the APPE license is a free service. So you can just activate it once the router has been registered to the MyVigor account. Once the router is registered, you just need to click on the activate option, as you can see highlighted here. And after you click on activate, you'll be taken to the MyVigor account that I've got shown here. And you'll see the APPE service listed. You just need to click on the trial as shown here and just follow the prompts. The license runs for 365 days, which is 12 months. And then after this period, you just need to reactivate this free license. So there's no cost involved. It's just a matter of registering your router and clicking activation. So the next menu option under CSM is the URL content filter profile. So the URL content filter allows you to enter keywords for websites that you want to block. So for example, we may want to block any websites that have Hotmail in the URL. So to do this, we first need to define the keyword objects in object setting keyword object menu that I've got shown here. And for our example, we enter the keyword Hotmail for the contents. So I'm not too sure if you can see it, but just you just type in the keywords you want to enforce. And then the next step is to create the the URL profile that I've got shown here. And there you just select the keyword. And then in the URL content filter profile, there's a drop-down menu for priority. So there are 4 options here, which are both pass. I don't know if you can just see that it's in the red box. And then both block. Then either URL access control first and either web feature first. And some users can get confused about what the first 2 options mean. So I'll just try to explain that in the next couple of slides. So if both pass is selected, then the data packets will be passed if it matches the criteria of both URL access control and web feature rules. If any data packets are not matched, then the website will be blocked. And then, so similarly for the other option, which is block or both unblock. And if that's selected, then the data packets will be blocked if it matches the criteria of both URL access control and web feature rules. So if any data packet is not matched, then the website will be passed. So it'll just be the opposite of the first one. So here we have a summary of the URL priority options, which I mentioned earlier. And here we have a completed profile, and you can customize the message that will be displayed to the user when they attempt to access the blocked website. And I just got that just highlighted down the bottom there, but you can change the message to whatever suits your business. And once the URL content filter has been defined, it is then applied to the firewall rules as shown here. So there's a URL content filter option. You just select that one. And but there are a number of application notes in our knowledge base that cover various examples of using the URL content filter. And I'll go through an example later on as well through the video. And the next menu option under CSM is the web content filter. The web content filter can be used to block whole categories of websites, say for example sports, online shopping, and so on. The web content filter does not require actually it does require an annual subscription, but the routers do come with a 30-day trial, so you can try it before you decide to buy the license. And when you select the web content filter profile, you'll see a page similar to this one. At the top you have the web content filter license information. It just shows you if the web content filter is enabled and the expiry date. And usually once it's activated, if it does expire, you'll get an automatic email from MyVigor to let you know that it's close to expiry. And then below that, you highlighted in red, is the profile table. And here you can create a profile and select the categories to filter. So I'll show an example in the next slide. And you can also select the required cache to use as well. And also you can customize a message to display to the user if they try to access a blocked website. So it'll be similar to the one I showed you earlier for URL content filter. So the web content filter relies on data maintained by Siren, which used to be called CompTouch. So it's updated regularly, so users are assured that they will be protected. There is an option in web content filter profile in the main menu to check the URL category for a particular website. So if you find that a particular website is not classified correctly, you can manually suggest the required category to Siren so they can update it. And this can be done from the Siren web page. So you click on the link, it takes you to the web page, and then you type in the URL. And here we've got an example. So in this example, which just shows you the message returned for this particular website, which is classified as nudity. But if you find that it's wrong, you can just reply back to the email through the prompts. For the web content filter, you can block websites by category. And here you can see some of the categories of websites that can be blocked from, by the web content filter. So you can select some or all of the required types by clicking on the category, as I've shown here. So here I've got some categories selected under child protection. So you've got alcohol, hate, intolerance, porn, school cheating, child abuse, and sex education. And the web content filter can be used for parental control as well, where parents can restrict the type of websites that their children can access. And here we're selected to block all the categories under child protection. So it's all the categories got a little tick next to the options there. So once enabled, the parent does not need to worry if the young children are exposed to these harmful websites. And the web content filter can also be used by employers to limit access, for their staff to certain websites. So this can be used with time scheduling, where, for example, you can block access to these sites during, say, work hours, but permit access during the lunch break. And here we have the scheduling feature, where you can select the time period as well as which days to apply the schedule. So, for example, parents may want to prevent their children from accessing social networking sites during the time the children should be working on their schoolwork. But I'll go over, I won't show the example of a web content filter, but there are some application notes on our website for that. Then, if required, the network administrator can monitor content security activity on his network from the router syslogs that I've got shown here. And you can download the syslog utility from our website, install it on the PC, and use that to capture the syslogs. But most often syslogs are used for diagnostic purposes. And then finally, we have the DNS filter profile. It can be applied to either the web content filter or URL content filter. The DNS filter was developed to block HTTPS websites. So previously, any websites that used HTTPS encryption were not able to be effectively blocked using URL or web content filter. So one way to overcome this was to determine all the IP addresses that I got shown here. So used by a website, add that to the firewall configuration. So here we have a list of IP addresses used by Facebook. You will probably need to spend some time to determine all the IP addresses. Then once you have all the IP addresses, you just need to create firewall rules to block these IP addresses. And you'll need to ensure that the IP list is up to date. But when you look at the DNS filter menu, you notice that we have a DNS filter profile table and DNS filter local settings options. So we only need to use one of them to make DNS filter to work. And the choice depends on what DNS server the client is using. If the LAN client computer is using an external DNS server, which means the DNS queries are sent to the WAN interface, then we should use the DNS filter profile and then use the profile in a firewall filter rule. And to check if the PC is using an external DNS, you can run the command ipconfig/all that I've got shown here. And in this example, the PC is configured to use 8.8.8 and 8.8.4.4, which are external DNS servers. If the LAN client PC is using the Vigor router as the DNS server, which means the DNS queries are sent directly to the router, then we should use the DNS local filter setting. The DNS filter local setting checks the DNS queries that are destined to the router, but it does not filter the source IP address. So please note that once the DNS filter local setting is enabled, it will apply to all the LAN clients who use the Vigor router as their DNS server. And then to check if the PC is using the router for DNS queries, you run the command ipconfig/all. But in this case, you notice an example that the PC is configured to use 192.168.1.1 for the DNS, and that's the DrayTek router. So now I'll just go over one example and showing you how to use CSM. So in this example, I'll show you how to use the URL filter with the DNS filter to block a HTTPS website. So for HTTPS websites, we can just use the URL filter to block websites with certain keywords in its URL. But with HTTPS websites, the URL filter may not recognize them since the packets are encrypted. Therefore, we have to use the DNS filter. So to make it a bit easier to follow the example, I'll just show you a quick video which goes through the steps required. Hello everyone. In this video I will describe how you can use the URL filter with the DNS filter to block a HTTPS website. For HTTPS websites, we can just use the URL filter to block websites with certain keywords in its URL. But with HTTPS websites, the URL filter may not recognize them since the packets are encrypted. Therefore, we have to use the DNS filter. The first step after you log into the router is to create the required objects. To do this, we go to Object Setting, Keyword Object menu in the router and select the first index number in the keyword object profiles. Next we enter a profile name. I have entered Facebook here. Then we enter the keywords we want to check in the URL filter. I want to block Facebook, so I have entered facebook.com as the keyword. We click OK to save the settings. The next step is to configure the URL content filter profile. Go to the URL content filter profile menu and select the next available profile. Now we enter the profile name and then select priority as either URL access control first. Then we enable URL access control, select block, and then enter the keyword object and click OK to save. Now we need to configure the DNS filter profile. Go to the DNS filter profile menu option and select the first available profile. We enter a profile name and select UCF to be the URL content filter profile we created earlier, which is block Facebook. Now click OK to save. In our example, the computers will point to the router for DNS queries. Here we have the DNS server pointing to 192.168.1.1, which is the router LAN IP address. So we will need to enable DNS filter local setting and select the URL profile we created earlier for UCF setting. The final step in our configuration is to set up the firewall. To do this, we go to Firewall Filter Setup menu and select the default data filter, which is filter set number 2. We will select filter rule 2. In this filter rule, we enable the filter rule and edit the source IP to apply this firewall rule. I have entered the IP address range 192.168.1.10 to 192.168.1.20, so it will only apply to some PCs on the network. For firewall action, we will select the filter as pass immediately. Select URL content filter and DNS filter profiles we created earlier. Then click OK to save. To test that the DNS filter is working, we try to go to https www.facebook.com and check that a message appears similar to that shown here to indicate that the website is now blocked. We can now test the URL filter by going to http www.facebook.com and check that a message appears similar to that shown here to indicate that the website is now blocked. Okay, so the video just went through very quickly how to configure the URL filter and with using DNS filter. And that video is available on our knowledge base and also through YouTube as well.